The rain hammered against the bakery window like bullets of despair, and through the glass, Elena Martinez counted the coins in her trembling palm for the fourth time, praying that somehow the number would change, that somehow $3.17 would magically become enough to feed her daughter something more than a single slice of bread. Her reflection stared back at her from the storefront, a ghost of the woman she used to be, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, her eyes hollow with the kind of exhaustion that sleep could never cure. And in that moment, watching the warm golden light spill from inside the bakery onto the cold wet pavement, she wondered how her life had collapsed so completely that she was now calculating whether her 5-year-old daughter Maria could survive another day on tap water and hope. If you believe in kindness, if you believe that one moment of compassion can change everything, if you believe in second chances and the power of human connection, please hit that like button right now, share this story with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, and subscribe to our channel because we share stories that remind us why humanity is worth believing in. Elena had been standing outside Baker's Corner for 20 minutes, building the courage to walk through that door, because walking through that door meant admitting defeat, meant acknowledging that the accomplished architect who once designed buildings that touched the sky was now reduced to begging for breadcrumbs. 6 months ago, she had everything, a thriving career, a beautiful apartment overlooking the city, a husband she thought would stand by her forever, but cancer doesn't care about your plans, and medical bills don't care about your dreams, and when her mother's illness drained every penny they had, when the treatments failed anyway, when grief became a physical weight she carried in her chest, her husband Marcus had looked at her with cold eyes and said he hadn't signed up for this kind of life, and just like that, he was gone, taking their savings, their car, everything except Maria, their daughter, the only light left in Elena's collapsing world. The eviction notice had come 30 days later, and Elena had learned that falling from grace doesn't happen slowly, it happens in an instant, like stepping off a cliff you didn't know was there, and suddenly you're in free fall with no ground in sight. She pushed open the bakery door, and the smell of fresh bread hit her like a memory of better times, of Sunday mornings when her mother would bake cinnamon rolls and the whole house smelled like love and safety, and Elena had to bite her lip hard to keep from crying right there in front of everyone. The bakery was warm and crowded with the lunch rush, businessmen in expensive suits ordering sandwiches without looking at the prices, mothers buying cookies for children who had never known hunger, and Elena felt invisible among them, a shadow person from a shadow world that existed just beneath the surface of their comfortable reality. She approached the counter with her $3.17 clutched so tightly in her fist that the coins left red marks on her palm, and when the young woman behind the register smiled at her with that professional kindness that meant nothing personal, Elena forced her voice to stay steady as she asked how much for just one slice of bread, just the cheapest one they had, and she watched the smile falter on the worker's face, watched pity bloom there like a wound. And Elena wanted to scream that she wasn't always like this, that she used to matter, that she used to be someone. From the back of the bakery, a man's voice cut through the ambient noise, deep and commanding but somehow gentle at the same time, and he said something that Elena couldn't quite hear over the pounding of blood in her ears, over the shame that was drowning her from the inside out. The crowd seemed to part naturally as he walked forward, this tall man in his mid-30s with dark hair starting to silver at the temples, wearing jeans and a flour-dusted apron that somehow looked dignified on him, and when his eyes met Elena's, she saw something there that made her breath catch, not pity, not disgust, but recognition, as if he saw past the hunger and the desperation to the person she used to be, to the person she still was underneath all this suffering. He was Nathan Cole, though Elena didn't know this yet, didn't know that he owned not just this bakery but a chain of them across 3 states, didn't know that Forbes had called him one of the most innovative CEOs under 40, didn't know that he had built his empire from nothing after his wife died giving birth to their son, didn't know that he understood loss in the way only those who have truly lost everything can understand it. What she saw was a man who stepped around the counter and said in that same gentle voice, loud enough now for her to hear clearly, "Sit down, eat first, we can talk about payment after," and Elena opened her mouth to protest, to explain that she wasn't a charity case, that she just needed one slice, but he was already guiding her to a small table by the window with a hand that barely touched her elbow but somehow made her feel less alone than she had in months. The other customers had gone back to their conversations, their sandwiches, their normal lives, but Elena felt frozen in place at this table, watching as Nathan returned carrying a tray loaded with soup and bread and a sandwich and a glass of milk. Far more food than $3.17 could ever buy, far more kindness than she knew how to accept. He set it down in front of her and then did something that shattered the last of her composure. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down himself, as if they were equals, as if she deserved the time and attention of someone who clearly had a business to run. And when he said, "Please eat, I insist," something broke inside Elena's chest and the tears came before she could stop them, hot and shameful, streaming down her face as she tried to apologize, tried to explain that she wasn't normally like this, wasn't normally so emotional, but Nathan just pushed a napkin across the table and waited with infinite patience for her to collect herself. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, but hunger has its own logic, and soon she was eating faster, the warm soup filling the hollow places inside her that had been empty for so long. And Nathan sat there the entire time, occasionally sipping his own coffee, not asking questions, not demanding explanations, just being present in a way that felt like a gift. When she finally slowed down, when the worst of the hunger had been quieted, Elena found herself talking, the words spilling out of her like water from a broken dam, telling this stranger about her mother, about the medical bills, about Marcus leaving, about living in her car with Maria, about applying for dozens of jobs but having gaps in her resume that no one wanted to overlook, about feeling invisible and worthless and so desperately afraid that she was failing her daughter, that Maria would grow up remembering her mother as this broken thing who couldn't even provide basic necessities. Nathan listened to all of it without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes or false promises, and when she finished, when the story had emptied out of her and left her feeling raw and exposed, he leaned forward slightly and told her his own story, about losing his wife Claire during childbirth, about holding his newborn son while simultaneously grieving the love of his life, about the darkness that had consumed him in those early months when he thought he might not survive the weight of single fatherhood combined with soul-crushing grief. He told her about rebuilding himself piece by piece, about learning that strength isn't about never falling down but about getting up one more time than you fall, about how his bakeries had started as a way to honor Claire's memory because she had always dreamed of owning a small cafe, and how that small dream had grown into something bigger than he ever imagined possible. But none of it, not the success or the money or the accolades, none of it mattered as much as being a good father to his son, as much as using his position to help people who were struggling the way he had struggled. He asked Elena about her background, and when she mentioned architecture, his eyes lit up with genuine interest, and he started asking specific questions about her experience, about projects she had worked on, about her design philosophy, and for the first time in months, Elena felt like a professional again, like someone with skills and knowledge and value beyond just being a cautionary tale. The conversation shifted naturally, and Nathan mentioned almost casually that his company was in the middle of expanding, designing new bakery locations, and their current architectural firm was good but lacked a certain understanding of how to create spaces that felt warm and welcoming rather than just efficient. And did Elena think she might be interested in consulting on the project, just reviewing some plans, offering her perspective, nothing too demanding given her current situation, but he would of course pay her standard consulting rates. Elena stared at him, trying to process whether this was real or some kind of elaborate pity disguised as opportunity, but Nathan's expression was entirely sincere, and he pulled out his phone to show her photographs of the proposed locations, genuinely asking for her professional opinion. And Elena found herself analyzing the spaces, pointing out how natural light could be better utilized, how traffic flow could be improved, how small design changes could transform a functional space into a welcoming community hub. She was so absorbed in the discussion that she didn't notice the time passing, didn't notice that the lunch rush had ended and the bakery had quieted, didn't notice that for the first time in half a year, she felt like herself again, like Elena Martinez the architect rather than Elena Martinez the desperate woman begging for bread. When she finally looked at the clock and realized she needed to get back to Maria, whom she had left with a neighbor who could only watch her for 2 hours, Nathan walked her to the door and handed her a business card with his direct number, along with an envelope that he said contained an advance on her consulting work, and when Elena opened it later in her car, she found $2,000 in cash along with a note that said simply, "Everyone deserves a second chance to show the world who they really are." That money meant she could get a cheap motel room for a week, could feed Maria properly, could buy Maria the medication she needed for her asthma, could start to claw her way back toward stability. But more than the money, more than the temporary relief, what Nathan had given her was something infinitely more valuable. He had seen her, really seen her, not as a charity case or a problem to be solved but as a fellow human being deserving of dignity and respect and opportunity. If this story has touched your heart, if you felt Alina's pain and Nathan's compassion, if you believe that we all need reminding that kindness still exists in this world, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and leave a comment telling us about your own experiences with unexpected kindness or how this story made you feel, because your engagement helps us share these important messages with more people who need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that might change your perspective or restore your faith in humanity. The consulting work was real, and Elena threw herself into it with the passion of someone given a lifeline, working late into the nights at the motel after Maria fell asleep, creating designs that exceeded Nathan's expectations so thoroughly that he offered her a full-time position as his head of design and development within 3 weeks. And suddenly Elena had not just a job but a career again, health insurance, a steady paycheck, the ability to rent an apartment and give Maria a real home. But beyond the professional success, something else had developed, a friendship between two people who understood loss and resilience, who had both been broken and had both found the strength to rebuild. And Nathan became not just Elena's employer but her friend, and later, much later, when enough time had passed and enough healing had occurred, something more than that, because sometimes the people who find us in our darkest moments are the ones meant to walk beside us into the light. Years later, when Elena's designs had won awards and she had her own team and Maria was thriving in school, she would sometimes drive past Baker's Corner and remember that rainy afternoon when she had counted $3.17 and wondered if she could survive another day, and she would think about how a single act of kindness, a simple invitation to sit down and eat first, had changed the entire trajectory of her life. She would remember that Nathan hadn't just given her a meal or a job, he had given her back her dignity, had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, had believed in her potential when she had forgotten she had any, and in doing so, he had reminded her that we are never just our worst moments, never just our failures and losses, that redemption is always possible if someone is willing to extend a hand and if we are brave enough to take it. Before we end, we want to ask you something special. Please comment below with the word kindness if you believe that one person's compassion can change another person's entire life, because we want to see how many of you truly believe in the power of human connection and generosity. The truth is that there are thousands of Elenas in this world right now, good people who have fallen on hard times, who are one paycheck away from disaster, who are trying so hard to maintain their dignity while the world crumbles around them. And there are also thousands of Nathans, people with the means and the heart to make a difference if they just take a moment to truly see the struggling person in front of them. This story reminds us that we all have the power to change lives, sometimes with grand gestures but often with simple acts of recognition and respect, with treating people as human beings rather than problems, with offering opportunity rather than just charity, with remembering that there but for the grace of circumstance go any of us, and that the measure of our humanity lies not in how we treat those who can benefit us but in how we treat those who seem to have nothing to offer us in return except their gratitude and their dignity and their determination to rise again.